Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Eloise Schottler. I'm your storyteller. Once, there was a village where war had been going on around them for years. And it moved out away from their town, and so the soldiers had to go away in order to be the soldier in the war. A woman was so lonely. Her husband had been gone for so long, and then she heard that he was going to be coming home. She was very excited. She got her house all cleaned and fixed and brought in special fruits that she knew that he liked and wouldn't have had any in all the time that he had been gone. And she had been so lonely for him. She missed him terribly. Well, he came back. But it was like he hadn't come back. His body was there. His eyes were open. He had very little to say. It was like his spirit had not come back with him. And she talked, and she'd go over and she'd put her arm around him, and he just didn't respond at all. And she was so unhappy over that. I mean, this is what she'd been looking forward to. A kiss or a hug, even just holding a hand that she had missed for all those months that he had been gone. He had taken a chair and moved it over close to a window, and he just sat there during the day, looking out and down a mountain. And so she said, "What is the matter? What is wrong? I've just been so eager for you to come home, and you don't say a word. You don't let me know that you are glad that you are home, that you're happy to see me too." And he looked at her, but he had nothing to say. So one day she got up, she went in the room. He was sitting by that window, looking down, not saying anything. And she just felt the sadness coming up in her. And anger was with it. "Where's my husband?" And she left through the front door. And she walked down into the village. "Where is my husband? Where is he?" And as she walked by all this down the road, she went for a long time, and she walked in front of a small house that she knew because she'd heard it. She knew there was an old man that lived there that could make a love charm. "I need a love charm," she thought. "I need a love charm so that he'll turn back and be my husband again, so that we can go back to our life again." She walked up to the door, knocked, and he opened the door and stood back startled that there was this woman standing there. And he said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "I need a love charm for my husband. He's a soldier. He's just come back from the wars, and he's just not himself." She went in, they talked for a little, and then he said, "What do you want?" "A love charm. I've already told you I wanted a love charm." "I can do that. I know how to do that, but there's one special ingredient that I need. I cannot make it unless I have a special ingredient, and you'll have to get it for me." "What do you mean I'll have to get it? You're the one that's going to make the charm, but you have to go and get the special charm." "Well, what is it?" He looked at her. "It's the whisker of a tiger." "The whisker of a tiger? Are you a crazy man? The whisker of a tiger. How could I possibly get the whisker of a tiger?" If you really want your husband back, and if you really think that you have to have that love charm, you will think it through and figure out how to get that whisker. She turned and ran out the front door and down the road. She was going toward the market. And as she rode, and then she stopped, and she slowed down, and she was walking, and she was thinking about if she wanted him back, she would figure it out. And she decided that there was possibly something she could do. She went into the stall where a man sold meat, and she bought a big piece of meat, and he wrapped it in paper and gave it back to her. And she went the other way out the town and up the mountain, because she knew that there was a place up on the hill where tigers lived. They lived in a cave. She thought, I don't know, maybe I won't be killed, but I could try this. I'll feed a tiger and see how far that takes me. So she was very scared. She was very, very scared. She could feel her heart beating, and she went up close, and outside of the opening to one of the caves was a tiger stretched out in the sun, sleeping. She was very quiet. She stepped behind a large rock so that she could watch him, but he couldn't see her. And one time he reached up, lifted his head. He was big. His head was so big. But she dropped the paper off of the meat. The blood got on her fingers, and she reached out, stepped out into the road, and she ran up and threw it. And it landed right in front of him. And she turned and ran back to her hiding place behind the rock. The tiger sniffed all around it, smelled it, tasted it with his tongue, and then gobbled it right down. Well, that's one thing to do. So she went home. Things were the same. She didn't tell him what she had done. But the next morning, she left her home early. She went back to the market, and she bought a little bigger but fairly good-sized piece of meat. And she went back behind the rock where she could hide. And when the tiger went to sleep, she stepped out. She wasn't going to worry about whether he could see her or not. She stepped out, she stepped toward him, just a little toward him, and then she threw the meat toward him, and it landed right in front of him. All that tiger had to do was lift up his head and stretch, and he had it in his teeth. She did this every day, and after 5 days, she was almost next to the tiger. And when she appeared, the tiger was just laying there sound asleep. He was just, his sounds coming out of his mouth, he was breathing, sounded like a little house cat, but a big house cat. And he slept, and then he opened one eye, and he saw her, and he didn't move. And she came closer still and sat beside him, and he didn't move. And she reached up with her package and took the paper off and set it down for him. The same thing the next day, the same thing the next day, the same thing the next day. And after another week, she was sitting beside him. One afternoon, he lifted his head, he even looked at her, she got out the meat, and he laid his head on her lap as soon as he finished eating. He ate, and then he laid his head down on her lap and went back to sleep. And when he did that, she reached in her pocket, and she took out a very small scissor and reached over and very carefully clipped a whisker from his face. And then she slipped out from under his head, and she ran as fast as she could back to the village, back to the house where the man who could make the love charm lived. She knocked on the door. He opened the door. "Well, it's you again. What are you here for? I told you I want a love charm. I want you to make it. And here's the whisker from a tiger up on the hill out there." He looked at it. He took it and he felt it and he looked at it and he said, "It is a real tiger's whisker." And she said, "Of course it's a real tiger's whisker." And he said, "How did you do it?" And she explained what she had done. And then she said, "Now make my charm." And he took the whisker and he dropped it into the fire. "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're burning up the whisker, the magic that would go in that love charm. Why are you doing that?" "Because you don't need it. You don't need it. You know what to do. Think about what you have done." And she told him how she got the whisker. She told him again, and he said, "Tell me again," and she did. You know how to do it. Just go home and do it. She started out and she went right home. She came in. He was sitting by the window. She made him his favorite dish for dinner and took it nearby, and then she moved away. Every day she did something that she knew he really liked, and she moved away. And then she came closer and closer. And after a while, he seemed to respond. And after a while, he took her hand. And after a while, he looked into her face and smiled. And she saw in his eyes that he was returning. I am so glad that you have come home. I am too. I am glad to be home.